Hi, amigos, amigas. Bienvenidos. Be welcome to Lima, Peru. Welcome to my home. Welcome to this small cultural corner dedicated to the history of Peru, dedicated to Latin America. Thank you so much for visiting me today. My name is Vanessa Vasquez. I am your Lima City guide. I am an official tour guide that loves to share stories, cultural facts, curiosities, the untold history with you all. Sherry, hola. Hi, Sherry. It is so good to see you again here, my friend. Muchas gracias. Thanks for coming to Lima. And oh, by the way, I'm going to turn the camera just to present myself properly. Thank you again for visiting my home. This tour today is part of my series dedicated to the untold history of Peru. I have created this series to talk about themes that are like uncomfortable or strange or simply that are not really, that well spread over around the world, because Peru is a very distant country from most of the countries where you come from. So the Untold History series deals with these issues, deals with these interrogants, these incognitas. And I really hope that through this series that I'm creating for you, you're going to get access into themes that are, in my opinion, very interesting, and you can also dive in there in your free times, for example. Hola, Diana. Hello. Quick question. Have you done part two of the Japanese history of Peru? I think I haven't, Diana. I think I haven't. I'm going to be, because we've been doing lots of different tours, and I think I haven't. Oh no, I did, Diana, I did. And you can also check it out in my YouTube channel. It is in my YouTube channel. By the way, if you would like to see the series of the Untold History, and also Tales from the Pre-Hispanic Times, and also all of these themes that I'm just doing for one time only. I have created a YouTube channel, and I'm using the recordings of these events. Now Heygo permits us guys to have some access to recordings, so to share these stories with you. So Diana, please go to my YouTube channel. I think it is already there, the second part of the Japanese immigration to Peru. And to access there, you just have to look for Adventuros Travel Guide, which is my nickname, my let's say, I don't know how you call it in the social medias, but that's my alternative name in social medias. So at the end, also, I'm going to share with you how you can get into my YouTube channel. Also, no worries, Diana. Thanks for asking me about that. Because, well, I'm usually doing series about the immigrations to Peru. But I was thinking that we're talking about the immigrations to Peru, right? We're talking about the Chinese immigration and the African immigration, and also the Japanese and the Jewish immigration to Peru also. What about the Mestizos? What about the mixed blood children of the Spanish conquistadors that were the first Peruvians, to be honest, the first Peruvians, the ancestors of us Peruvians, in terms of fusion, cultural mix. So that's why I thought it would be super interesting for all of us to talk about the first mestizos of Peru. So are you ready to start, my friends? If you can, give me a thumbs up just to know that everything is working great. And also, if there's any drop in the internet connection, my internet connection is regularly very stable, but sometimes it happens with so many traffic of tours, it drops down. So let me know only if you have an issue, and I'll try to, if I can, fix it. See? Gracias, Diana. Gracias, Marilyn. Thanks for coming. Gracias, Leah. Thanks for being here today. To the new people joining to my tours, be welcome. I hope you can come like several times consecutively, because every time you see these tours from home, from my house, there will be something new to share. So now we're going to go to the story of today. And as I was saying, this story of today is dedicated to the first mestizos of Peru. We're going to talk about who was a mestizo. This is going to be a very general, let's say, lecture, although eventually we're going to dive in deeper and deeper into this story. So this is part of the Untold History of Peru series. My name is Vanessa Vasquez. I am your official tour guide in Lima, Peru. So what is a mestizo? You might be wondering, what is this word? So mestizo is a word that we learn in Peru that was used to denominate or to classify the people that came from let's say, a union between a Spanish, a European immigrant in the colonial period, and an indigenous woman in most of the cases, but in some occasions there were indigenous men mixing with Spanish women. So when we talk about mestizo in the colonial times, we are referring to these first children of let's say, these unions, which as the true Americans of that time, because they were considered to be the first Americans, right, by the Spanish crown, that were also descendants of the Spaniards, are the ones that eventually gave to the country, this idea or this flavor of finally embracing, the reality, the new reality in which we were living, right? So in the colonial times, when the Spanish conquistadors came, they were created this sort of like a stratified, let's say, pyramid, in which we have castas or castes, which were social groups, in which on the tip, in the top, we had the Spanish, the Europeans. Below them were also the criollos. The criollos were the children of the Spaniards born in America, so they were of Spanish blood. And below them, we have different groups. We have, for example, the mestizos, like the images you are seeing here. They are very cute, of these children that have elements, genetic elements from mom and dad, right? And also below them, we had other subgroups, which we're going to be also talking about in a little while. But also, let me tell you that mestizo, to be a mestizo nowadays, is something a bit different, no? Because you are no longer finding, children that are half Spanish, half indigenous in Peru anymore, no? Nowadays, when we talk about mestizos, we talk about, like, it's more a general way of talking about someone that is mixed. There are many different people in Peru that consider themselves being mixed blood, and not necessarily only indigenous and European. We had descendants of Chinese, descendants of Africans, descendants of Italians. So when we see people that are mixed blood, we also use the word mestizo nowadays. But back in the old days, back in the 16th century, 17th century, things were very different. So here I'm trying to give you a look into the castas or castes. So this was the most literal translation I found for the word castas. These different groups of different ethnicities that were being born around the idea of fusion, cultural fusion, and ethnic fusion. Most important was the ethnic fusion, right? So these classifications were not exactly the same in all the Spanish Americas. There were some variants. Some names changed in Mexico, for example, and here in Peru. But you can see that we have multiple different groups. For example, here we have let me try to, I'm going to use my finger in this case. We have here from Español with India, we have a mestizo, right? Español and India mestizo. And we have different groups. We have, for example, mestizo with Española. We have a castizo. A castizo. And look at this. Just in this case, castizo and española, and Spanish woman, español. So after some generations, you could be Spanish again, right? But this didn't happen with the Spanish who were mixed with African slaves. So there's no point in which their children are considered to be, again, like Spanish, right? So just to give you an idea of the tremendous differences in the way of how the Spaniards consider also the indigenous and how they saw the African black slaves, right? So how mestizaje started in Peru, how this idea of cultural and especially ethnical fusion started in Peru. So well, it started very, very early in the history of Peru with the very coming of the conquistadors, of the Spanish conquistadors, in which most of the mestizaje, most of the mixing of bloods occur due to forced intercourses, to rapes. And also we have here a question, Diana, is castizo also criollo? No, not exactly, Diana, because a castizo has indigenous blood, right? Criollo, to be very, very precise with the word criollo, in the colonial times. Remember that we are talking about the colonial, let's say, interpretation of these words. In the colonial time, a criollo was the son of a Spanish woman and a Spanish man born in America. So if you were born in America, although you had genetically all the European background, you were European, just because you were born in America, you were criollo, and you were considered inferior than a Spanish born in Spain. Oh, you're welcome, Diana, no problem. So that's why also the independences of Latin America, of the Spanish America, were conducted most of the time by criollos, because criollos consider themselves being extremely discriminated. It was not about equality at that point. It was just that criollos wanted to access to power, right? And they had no chance to do that. So here you can see the three genetic groups that met in Peru at the time of the arrival of the conquistadors. We're talking about the 16th century. So just rephrasing what I was saying, the first mestizaje, the first mixing of bloods that occurred in Peru, most of the time was consequence of rapes. Because remember that the conquistadors came alone. They were just men or soldiers that were, separated from the families, and at some point they saw indigenous women as an easy target, right, to satisfy their personal needs. But also there is mestizaje that was even a political use from the Spanish to escalate socially in the country, because we had also an Inca nobility, right? We will talk about that in a moment. So remember, indigenous Spanish and Africans, black Africans, the ones that were the first three groups that mixed in Peruvian territory. So here's some, let's say, more general, like, or more used words in these colonial times, sort of like the differences. I have this expert in Spanish, but I'm going to translate, and also I want you to practice your Spanish, please, my friends. You have to learn a little bit of Spanish after my tours. So the division of these groups was way more complex than just Spanish, indigenous, and black Africans, because since the 16th century, the mixing of bloods became very common. I've heard that in North America, for example, with the English conquest of that territory, or the colony, English colony of that territory, things were not the same. There were not subgroups like the ones we will show you, or I will show you today. That also shows that for the English, maybe, the mixing of bloods was not really like something acceptable, no? But in the case of the Spanish, it was different. The Spaniards, although in the beginning they banned the mixing of bloods between the Spanish and the Africans and the indigenous, unless, when in the case of the indigenous, it was used as a political tool. Eventually it happened, and they, were okay with that. But they had an extremely stratified society. So we will start with this. The mestizo, you already know, mestizo is the resulting of the union between an indigenous and a European and a Spanish. We're going also to talk later about the mulattos, which were also very, very common in Peru. Mestizos and mulattos were very common in Peru. The child of the union between an African, most likely woman, and a European, a Spanish. We have also another word, another group, sambo. In Peru, in the colonial Peru times, sambo was the child of an African and an indigenous woman, right? So these are the three top groups, the most important. But also you can see other different subgroups according to the different mixes. What a mess, right? Remember, criollo are the children of the Spanish, but born in America. Also to answer my friend Diana again. So let's talk about the first mestizos. Which types of mestizos existed in the colonial times? In my own, let's say, opinion, and also doing some research and looking for different official documents of historians, of Peruvian historians and chroniclers in the colonial times, I have come to the conclusion to share with you as well. I want to share this conclusion with you, that there were different types of mestizos at the beginning of the Spanish presence in Peru in the 16th century. So I'm going to share with you these mestizajes. So the first type of mestizo that I will share with you is the racial mestizaje, the ethnical and only ethnical mestizaje. Why I'm trying to say with this? I think the best case to talk about this theme is the case of Francisca Pizarro. Oh, Sherry, that's very interesting. Sambo, it's a word also that I know in North America was sort of used in a demeaning way, So I know many people consider this word sambo to be very, very hurtful. But in Peru, we still use the word sambo to talk about a friend that is darker skin. So we say sambito, sambo. So it's not an offensive word. Mulatto, mestizo, they are not anymore considered offensive words or demeaning words, right? So thanks for sharing that, Sherry. We have here the case of Francisca Pizarro. Who was Francisca Pizarro? Francisca Pizarro was the daughter of the conquistador Francisco Pizarro. This man that is considered as the most important conquistador of Peru, the head leader of the Spanish conquistadors, the Spanish conquest in this territory, a man who saw the falling of the Incan kings, Atahualpa, Huáscar, and also the person that initiated the mestizaje in Peru, in, let's say, a more sort of like ideological way too. So Francisco Pizarro, he united to an Incan princess, my friends. Pizarro, a man of weapons, a very tough man with his own particular story that I'm sure we're going to have a special event that I'm going to be created soon about biographies, the most famous biographies of Peru's history. So Francisco Pizarro has his own story, but Francisco Pizarro, when he came to Peru in this process of conquest, he met Inca Atahualpa. And Atahualpa was captured by the band of the Spanish. He was put in sort of like an imprisonment. And Atahualpa, as a way to create good bound, a relation with Pizarro, he offered Pizarro his sister. So the idea is that he used this as a way of, or a diplomatic move, right? So he gave to Pizarro his sister called Quispecisa, a girl that was in her mainly 15-year-old, more or less. He was a man in his 50s. So she was an adolescent, a teen, more or less, and he was already a full military man, an aged man for those days. And well, they united, they never married, but they produced two children. Only one of them, Francisca Pizarro, was able to overcome, keep alive many, many years after her parents died, something unfortunately very unusual in those days due to the diseases or to different situations. Francisca Pizarro is known as the first mestiza, the first mixed blood woman of Peru. She was born in the year 1534. Pizarro came to Peru in 1532 and came to Lima in 1535. So Francisca Pizarro came to Lima when she was a little baby, and she had a life that was very, very interesting. Here some other informations that I would like to share with you about these characters that I'm explaining about, some information about Pizarro, Quispecisa, the mother of Francisca, and something we know about the life of Francisca Pizarro is that she was not a common person. She was not a common mestiza. She was the daughter of the conquistador, and she was the daughter of a princess, an Incan princess. So there was no other woman in the early colonial times of Peru with the status as high and equal to Francisca. She was nobility, and she was also the creme de la creme, descendant of a conquistador. So she was very rich and also very desired. That's why eventually the crown in Spain decided that it was too risky, dangerous for her to stay in Peru, because after the passing of her father, due to some terrible civil wars that occurred during those days and fights between the conquistadors, she could not really stay any longer here. She could be used as a political weapon. She was way too dangerous, right? So that's why the king of Spain decided to demand her to go to that country, and she was married to her uncle, Hernando Pizarro. So Hernando Pizarro, the brother of Francisco, married her, and they produced 5 children, right? So her story is very interesting. But was she mestiza in her heart? That's the most important part. Was she mixed blood, right? Most likely she was not. She was ethnically, let's say, mixed. But when she was very young, Pizarro, Francisco Pizarro, asked the mother of Francisca, Inés Huaylas, also her Christian name was Inés Huaylas, to give Francisca to him. Mothers had not power over her children back then. So he gave his daughter to be educated by one of his closest, let's say, relatives. The brother of Pizarro, half brother of Pizarro, and his wife also became the educators of this woman, and the idea was that she will be raised in a Catholic environment, dressing up in a traditional European fashion with no connections with the Incan roots of herself, right? So that's why I said that Francisca Pizarro was a ethnical mestiza, but she was not mentally mixed and culturally mixed. Here, by the way, an image I rescued from a reconstruction of how possibly the very, very young Francisca Pizarro, let's say,
was loved and cared, or that's what I like to think, by Conquistador Pizarro and also Inés Guaylas. By the way, the information about Francisca Pizarro, I took it from a book that you can access also in internet. It's one of the most famous books about this woman, and it was made by a Peruvian writer, Maria Rostorovsky, in 2017. Here we have another case of another mestizo. This mestizo was a cultural and racial mestizo, which is a case that also is very interesting, because this man is known as one of the most prolific writers of the colonial times of Peru, and also he is known as one of the best chroniclers of Peru, or cronistas of the early colonial times of Peru. Well, the main characteristic of this man is that he was able to understand very well the Incan, it's a culture, and the Spanish culture, and that's how he interpret in a more correct way also those two worlds. So Inca Garcilaso de la Vega was descendant of Garcilaso de la Vega, a great Renaissance writer in Spain. He came from a noble family. He was possibly descendant of the most noble man who came to Peru in the time of the colonial period, the early colonial period. And this man also was descendant of a nobility, Inca nobility, of a princess, Isabel Chimpu Occhio. So here you can see the names of both his parents in that old time of the history of Peru. We're talking about the 16th century. He himself was also affected by the fact that as a mestizo and as the son of an Incan princess, sorry, his father did not marry his mother. We don't know if it was a love marriage, sorry, but we know that this union produced one son, which Mr. Sebastián Garcilaso de la Vega loved very much. He paid for the best education for him. Gracias, Sherry. So he paid for the best education for him. He provided the best he could. But he never intended to marry the mother of Garcilaso de la Vega, right? So it is very sad, because years after, when he was still a child, an early adolescent, his father married a Spanish woman and produced children, like from this marriage. So the story of Inca Garcilaso de la Vega is very different to the one of Francisca Pizarro, because he was raised by his mother, right? His father did not really care about how much his son would absorb from the Incan traditions. So he learned Quechua, knew Quechua. Most likely Francisca Pizarro did not speak Quechua, but he did. Also, he learned from his mother language, the Quechua, the stories of different events of the Incan past in first person, because it was his mother, his uncles, his relatives were the ones who told him the greatness of the Incan Empire. But it also is important to remember that Inca Garcilaso de la Vega came from a Panaca or family, or Incan family, noble Incan family, that also supported the Spaniards, right? Because there were two groups. There were the groups against the Spanish, the one that was pro-Atahualpa Inca, and the other one that was pro-Huáscar Inca. So he belonged to the Panaca, or the family that descended from Huáscar, and that's how also he maintained a very good position and also a perspective of things that were also very, very great in his opinion, because he did not really suffer as much as the people that were descendants or connected with Atahualpa, right? So all of these stories that he recopilated are existing now in a book, which I highly recommend you to look for if you want to understand this period of the history of Peru from first person, told by a man who absorbed from, we say, from the milk of his mother, the cultural influence of the Incas, and also that saw in first person the transition into the colonial period, right? In Spanish, the Comentarios Reales de los Incas. In English, the Royal Commentaries of the Incas. You can find this book online as well. It's a book that was that came out, was printed in the year 1609. Unfortunately, Inca Garcilaso de la Vega died in 1616. So the second part of his royal commentaries was also published posthumous, so after his death. But the most important, I think, a book, if you want to get into chronicles, is this one. This is the base for you all, my friends. And we have also this other case, which, by the way, this is a typo, this one here, is basically a cultural, in this case, only cultural mestizaje. So how can this be, right? How can mestizaje exist without, let's say, a racial element, right? Because the indigenous people were also eventually indoctrinated, talked into the new ways of the Spanish, right? Into their religion, into their faith, and many of them really embrace from their heart these new traditions. And that's how also occurs a mental, a cultural mestizaje, a cultural mix of traditions. So this is the case, my friends, of Guaman Poma de Ayala. I'm sharing with you some information about Guaman Poma de Ayala, a man that is known as one of the most important chroniclers of the history of Peru. We call them cronistas. A chronicler is the one who saw or hear from first person people that were present in the events of the conquest, right? So the particular element about Guaman Poma is that he was an indigenous person. He was indigenous. He came also from a family of high status, birth, right? So meaning that he was not a land worker. He inherited titles also, and that's why he had a sort of like very beneficial position in terms of other indigenous of his days. He was educated, by the way, and most likely we believe he was educated by Jesuits. The Jesuits were a little bit like anarchists of that time. I mean, they were looking for ideas of more egalitarian treatments between the to the indigenous by the Spanish, something that didn't happen. And eventually, because of their pressure, the Jesuits were kicked out Peru and all the Spanish territories in America, because the Crown of Spain believed them to be subversive, like terrorists, ideological terrorists of that time. So in the schools of the Jesuits were formed many thinkers, many fighters, many important heroes of our nation. Guaman Poma de Ayala, we know, was a person that was accommodated, was a wealthy man, but also he himself was sort of like a victim of abuses from the Spanish. So his territories, his plot of land, his lands were not being respected. He started to see that that was very common, that was happening a lot, and many Spaniards were taking like decisions against the indigenous without even consulting the higher authorities, right? So what he did, instead of just being bitter and angry and complaining about this, he, with his wealth that he had, he traveled and he started to visit different other locations, different other plots of lands, and he saw other people that were experiencing the same situations. So he started to take notes about all the different problems that the people that he was crossing, that was crossing his way, expressed to him. And he was educated. He knew to write and read, something that most people did not know to do that back then. So he took note of these denuncias, all of the people that were talking about the bad things happening. So he took notes and he created a chronicle, which is named the Nueva Crónica or Crónica. That's the way, that's all Spanish. It would be Crónica in nowadays Spanish. Nueva Crónica y Buen Gobierno, right? Well, the full name is a little bit longer, but basically this was a chronicle about the abuses of the Spanish. And we're going also to see in internet, if you go to Google, for example, you're going to find, if you look for the Nueva Crónica or Guaman, Poma de Ayala, some pages, experts from the book, which was discovered in Copenhagen in the year 1908. So how come this Crónica was discovered there? Well, the story, and now, well, historians believe that Guaman Poma created this over 100 pages of images. This was a mixed chronica with images that he made with his own hand, and also little stories, like phrases in which are mentioned the abuses, I mentioned the killings, I mentioned also the grandiosity of the pre-Hispanic leaders, the pre-Hispanic times. This is the for example, the messenger in the Inca times, how the male person used to be back then, right? We have lots of stories, the meeting between Atahualpa and Pizarro. So all of these stories he made in the Crónica. And then after, his plan was sending this to the King of Spain. So we believe that he sent this book possibly in the hands of someone that he trusted very much, but this Crónica never arrived to the hands of the king. And somehow it got lost and reappeared in Copenhagen, right, at the beginning of the 20th century. It's an interesting story. And by the way, if you want to see the images, look for, first of all, the title of the book that I mentioned, and then you're going to have lots of images explained in English as well. Maybe we're going to do a special edition of the Untold History, only sharing pages of the book of Guaman Poma de Ayala. I hope you would like to see something like that. And then we have, well, other type of mixing of bloods. Nowadays, when we talk about mestizo, we talk about not just the descendants of the indigenous and the Spanish. How many descendants of indigenous and Spanish first generation we have in Peru nowadays? Really not many. When we talk about mestizo in Peru, we talk about mixed blood in general, mixed blood. So this is the other type of mestizo I want to talk about also in this occasion, because although they had their own name, their own subgroup, they were considered to be inferior than the mestizos because they came from the Black African immigration as well. And we are talking in this case about the mulattos and the sambos, right? and I couldn't finish this event without talking about them. So what is a mulatto, my friends? A mulatto was the son or the daughter of the union of a Spanish, of a white person, and an African, let's say a first generation African, right? So that was a mulatto. To understand the word mulatto, mulatto comes from the Spanish word mula, which in English would be mule, right? So why this pejorative, this demeaning form of talking? We're talking about the colonial times, right? In which there was a extreme sort of like appreciation for the purity of blood, being appreciated more the fair skinned white European people. So this referred to the mix of a horse, right? Mula is the mix of a horse and a donkey, right? So referring that the horse was the Spanish and the donkey the African, right? So the product was a mulatto. So the mulattoes, most of the cases were put to work in the service of the Spanish. They were not always considered to be suiting for the hard work of the plantation fields. It was believed that at some point, because they received these doses of white influence in their blood, they were more suiting for domestic works, right? So most of them, they were more in the domestic field, in the urban zones. Oh, Leah, I'm so happy that you find all of this talk interesting. I'm so happy, Leah. That's the reason of all of this series. Muchas gracias, Leah. But we have also another group. We have other important group that was also very big in not just in Peru, in Mexico. For example, this is a reproduction from Mexico. This is the representation of the children, the fusion of the indigenous and the Africans. So remember, this society is extremely stratified, right? So in Mexico, for example, the product of this union, the children of this union, are called lobo. Lobo means wolf. That's the literal translation in Latin America in Spanish. But in Peru, we were not calling lobo a child of an African and an indigenous. Instead, we were using the word sambo. Yeah, you can see here the word sambo, right? So remember that Spanish Americas was big, and that's why there were different variations in terms of certain names given to these different castas or castes. So we have here another interesting case, for example. And in Mexico, sambo, which for us is the descendant of an Spanish and an African and an indigenous. In Mexico, sambo is different. For example, in that period, sambo is the child of, or the children of the African and a mulata, right? African and mulata. So we have some slight differences. I just want to let you know that this story is really complex. And a little bonus. Have you heard the word cholo before, my friends? Does anyone have heard the word cholo before? We use it a lot in Latin America. Cholo is a word that we use in Peru a lot. For example, we Peruvians, we feel ourselves being cholo. My cousin name, Sherry. See, of course, Diana. In Mexico, it's used a lot. For example, in Peru, we usually refer to cholo a person that has a indigenous background, but most of the time lives in the city, in the big city, right? So they are children of migrants from the Andes. But in the old days, a cholo, the word cholo existed too, and it referred to a mestizo and an India producing a child, a baby. So when they mix, that child was called cholo, right? So mestizo, remember, is the son of an Spanish and an indigenous, right? So the cholo has lots more of indigenous blood, right? So we all are also cholos in Peru, in Latin America. I think we have bigger load of indigenous blood in us. Of course, that if you go to Central America, there will be almost the same, the equivalent of African. In Peru, we use a lot the word cholo because we are also mainly descendants of indigenous. I really hope you enjoy this event, my friends. I try to keep it 30 minutes usually, but I can't. I like to share, different stories. So I hope you enjoy it. Sorry if it took a little bit longer. If you would like to see my upcoming events, please visit my Heygo channel, in which I share, Lima in all different formats. Like we do walking tours, I'm doing bike tours, by the way. I'm doing cooking classes. I'm going to be doing a cooking class in some few more minutes. So if you would like to come back to my home, please come and join me to prepare a delicious meal, my lunch, actually, a late lunch. And also later tonight, if you came maybe too late into this event, I'm going to repeat this event at around 6 p.m. Peruvian time. So you can come again if you wish and see the slideshow again. It would be lovely to have you. Muchas gracias, Marilyn. Thank you so much for your support, Leah. You know that this is the fuel that helps us tour guides to continue doing these events, because these are all free to watch events and only supported with your tips. We do this literally for free, and your tips help a lot. And also, we share your tips automatically with Heygo. So Heygo is existing thanks to you. If you would like to know how we can support Heygo, and you can also support me, I'm activating a button that will help you, will conduct you in direction to some information how you can do a tipping to this channel. Marilyn, Jay, muchas gracias. Diana, thank you so much. Come to my social medias. Check out my YouTube channel with the pre-recorded events. Come at any time here to Lima. Come later to cook with me, because I'm going to be cooking with my brother. Yes, Sherry, my brother is going to cook with me. So I'm finishing this event, and then we move everything in the other direction to start cooking Peruvian traditional cow chicken. So if you want to know how it is, please come. It's going to be delicious. So I have yes, Kaki, I see a question, and also Diana, really good. Oh, gracias, Diana. Thank you. I'm just trying to, give you all the insights to understand Peru in detail. Kaki, my friend, what percentage of the current Peruvian population is purely indigenous? That's a really good one, Kaki, because the mestizaje happened like everywhere in Peru, everywhere. Indigenous people from especially the groups of the jungle are the only ones that we can still find some pure indigenous blood, because these people were the ones that were isolated for longer times. That's also why I'm planning in the future to do some events about to introduce you into the world of the indigenous people from the jungle, which are a complete different ethnic group than the ones of the Andes. Part of my family comes from the Andes, so I am more connected to the ethnic traditions, cultural traditions of the Andes. But in the case of the people from the jungle, that's a complete different world, and I'm going to be doing a special about them. But in percentage, it might be very little. For example, in Peru, we have about 33 million people in this moment. My venture to say that pure blood people, because they are not official census in terms of that, might be around maybe 2% of the population of Peru, like pure, that no mix in blood, because most indigenous of Peru, even the Highlander people, if you do a DNA test to them, they are also a little bit at least Spanish, right? But I can also go deeper and do a proper investigation with some information for the event that I'm planning to do for you. Kaki, thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Thanks for your tip support. Hope to see you later. I have a couple of more events today, so I'm always a busy aunt. And well, take care. Have a lovely rest of the day, my friends. See you soon. Muchas gracias. Bye-bye. Thank you.